again, everyone. It's Samantha Tong at Labrakita Marketing with another expert interview. This is something I've never got involved in myself personally, so I'd be interested in this one. So we've got Sean Carnegie here, who's going to be talking about how you can use audio in marketing. So Sean, can you introduce yourself, please?
Well, gladly. Thank you for having me, Samantha. As you said, I'm Sean Carnegie, Managing Director at Radioville. So Radioville are an audio creative agency that specializes in helping brands and businesses raise their awareness and gain more customers through the power of audio advertising. And that audio advertising can be radio, could be online audio, Spotify, audio in podcasts or smart speakers, generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess these things have expanded a lot because back in the day, my background's business to business, so we didn't do a whole lot of radio advertising because it just didn't hit the right market. But these days, there's so many different podcasts and, like you say, Spotify that are targeting people because there'll be podcasts about business to business subjects, I guess, that are now of interest.
Exactly, but also because radio has evolved to such a point, well, audio has evolved to such a point, and data capture has evolved to a point that B2B brands can identify the type of person that they want to speak to, and businesses and people buy from people. So whilst you're a B2B marketer, you're trying to speak to a decision maker, and that decision maker is a person, and that decision maker has media consumption habits and will listen to various radio stations. So we've done numerous, we've done numerous campaigns for B2B brands because we've been able to target who their core demographic is and plan a media strategy and a creative around that.
That's really interesting because data has really transformed the market, especially in the B2B space, I feel, because that's same with TV as well. B2B brands are starting to do more advertising on TV because especially with fiber connections, and Sky apparently can do it as well, where they go different people in different households will actually be given different ads
within the same household.
Oh, within the same household.
It's the Sky AdSmart. So yeah, even within, if they've got the data and they understand that you might have two Sky boxes in two different rooms,
right? Yeah.
They might be served different ads, I think, is what I've been told anyway. TV is not my
No. But it sounds like that's very similar. How data, the more information that we have these days is kind of changing the market and how we are better able to target.
Yeah, it's programmatic advertising is now available and has been available on radio for ages. Because we've now got that data. But in addition to that, you can create programmatic creative as well. So whilst you could, in real time on radio stations, because most people now listen to, I don't know if it's most, but a significant amount of people now listen to radio, not through a little box in the corner of a room.
Yeah.
It might be their phone, or it might be their laptop, or it might be their smart speaker. So the media owners have got loads of data, so they can in real time serve different creatives to different demographics. So not only can the advertising be bought on a program, the advertising space, not only can that be bought on a programmatic basis that's highly targeted to your target audience, but the creative that is served to different people can be bespoke in real time. So you and I could be listening to the same radio station at the same time, and the clever wizardry that goes behind this technology will know that you're up in Edinburgh, I'm in London, I support Tottenham Hotspur, you support Glasgow Rangers, I don't know if you do or you don't, and they will serve you a commercial. They will serve us different commercials. But not only that, with a bit of data mining and understanding of your target demographic, not just the location, but your spending habits can be incorporated into that. Your purchasing habits and all of that kind of stuff could be factored in to the creative. So it could be really, really targeted. Yeah, it does sound a little Big Brother-esque at times. But yeah, you know, I suppose when used correctly, it can be used to really engage with your
exactly. It means people aren't sitting there listening to adverts they're not interested in.
Exactly, yeah.
That's really interesting. So I guess most marketers will be familiar with doing that with email. You know, different targets getting different versions of the the newsletter that goes out or whatever. But that's really interesting that you can do that in radio as well, or audio.
Yeah, do you know, and I would say this because I'm biased and I live audio, but there's nothing that there's nothing I can think of that another channel can do that radio can't. So if you're talking about building brand awareness, you're talking about changing perceptions of a brand, talking about tactical advertising where you're driving a certain response, talk about programmatic, all of those things that you could do with TV and you could do with digital marketing, you know, you are available to brands using audio, with the added bonus of radio and audio and sound being quite an emotive thing. You know? And so there's another layer there of human connection that is sometimes missing with some of the other channels.
Yeah, and it's good. I think I think also when people remember messages better if they receive it in different formats. So if they've read it, they've heard it, they've seen it, it's going to start to stick.
Yeah. This is it. And we've seen that with loads of our clients. What they tend to do is have a 360 marketing campaign, and they phase the different elements. So they might start with TV and out of home and then turn that off, and then have a period of time when they're in the papers and in print, and then bring in radio to amplify everything that's gone before. And because audio, I think this is still true, at the last research that was done, you could buy twice your audience per pound spent. You could buy twice the audience on radio as you could with the next best alternative. So it's really cost effective, and it's not expensive as TV. So what brands tend to do is go big on TV for a period of time, and then so that there's the halo effect and there's an amplification effect, they then continue radio or then engage radio afterwards, and it shines a spotlight on the TV that's gone before and continues to build that reach.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm really starting to get ideas going on my head. How can I use that? I'm sure other people watching are as well. That's okay. Wow. Okay. So yeah, so you can really so to kind of recap a little bit, you can get really, really targeted, because something that's really, really important is understanding your audience, which is step one before they even go to you, because otherwise I won't know how to target. But it comes back to that. I always say to clients, the first thing you need to know is to understand your audience, what the messages are per segment. So you can use audio in that way to target correctly. And yeah, it's like you say, it's another cost-effective channel, another way to get your message across. And I guess people are busy as well. So I don't know what the data on this is, but I guess people are able to listen to audio when they wouldn't be able to consume other media. So if they're driving, for example, is that quite common?
Yeah. There was a piece of research done, I forget who it was by, but it made that point, reaffirmed that point, that the benefit of radio is that, and audio, is that you can actively be engaged in another task while consuming it, which is unlike more than any other channel, because it's difficult to read a read a newspaper whilst driving.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't be doing that.
You know, yeah. So because most of the other channels involve using your eyes. And whilst that's the case, you know, it's difficult for you to have your eye on something else while you've got your eye on the advertising channel you're looking at.
Yeah. And I find increasingly target audiences, especially in my sort of sectors, technical industrial type people, partly because there's a skill shortage at the moment, which is really hitting those sectors. People are just so busy and they don't have time. So I think that's another thing to consider. And is that I don't know if there's data on this, but is that showing up? I know I listen to a lot more audio than I used to, not as it's broadcast personally. I don't know if I'm unusual there. Is audio consumption going up, including podcasts and that kind of thing?
Podcast listening is massively increased over the last year and a half. I don't have the exact number. I just know that it's on the rise. Likewise with commercial radio listening. I think in lockdown, when there are so many more people working from home, they were having the radio on in the background, or they were so radio listening went up. And I think podcasts, there's just so much content out there, really engaging content.
Some really great quality stuff as well.
So that podcasts offer a fantastic opportunity for brands for three main reasons. Three main opportunities. So you've got the opportunity to sponsor a podcast. So you find a podcast genre or genres that you think are likely to resonate with your target audience, and you sponsor that podcast. Or you can advertise within podcasts, as you would do within radio output. And then the third option, which is the really exciting one, is you can produce your own content as a brand. So we've not too long worked with a record label, and their objective was to encourage people to discover the back catalogue of some of their older recording artists. So we put together it's co-produced with a couple of production companies. So we put together a podcast series, which was produced by this record label. And within it, we were able to showcase some of the historic tracks. So it was,
that's ideal.
Showcasing women. It was showcasing fantastic women in music. And we had women throughout the ages, and they came on and they spoke about the artists that they loved, and we played snippets of the tracks, which encouraged listeners to discover artists that they hadn't heard before, or tracks that they hadn't heard before. So that was all good, and that was purely that was produced and funded by and with the brand itself. So so podcasts are increasingly becoming a very prominent marketing channel for brands.
That's brilliant. I know a few people who have started their own podcasts. I don't know how. I know one of them's. I know one is incredibly successful. I'm not sure about the others. So I guess if you're going to do it yourself, you need to know what your objectives are there. What is exactly you want to achieve, because I guess that's the most expensive option. If you're going to produce it yourself, you need to know exactly why you're doing it. And
but it's as long as the marketers view it as a branding exercise rather than a direct response. You know, this, like for example, with this record label, they understood that it was unlikely that it would lead to direct increases in revenue in the short term.
Absolutely,
Instead, it was this record label, aren't they amazing? They've got so many awesome people on their roster. They're champion for women. They celebrate female artistry. That's a brand that I want to be a part of. That's a brand that I want to engage with. So it was more of a brand exercise, brand consideration, brand positioning exercise, rather than revenue generating.
Yes, and that's something that I guess a lot of what you're talking about here is because in it's slightly different between B2B and B2C, but you with both, there's been a lot of research, and I mean, we all need to think about the long term as well as short term. There's a short term lead generation type of advertising, marketing, etc. And then there's the long term brand building stuff that you need to do as well. In B2B, it's you should put about it's 50-50 what you should put in terms of your what you invest in. B2C, that's even more skewed towards brand building type work. So that's definitely that definitely makes sense, that it's more about building that brand up. But I guess you still need those listeners, so it's got to be something that people want to listen to.
Yeah, there's no point telling a brand story or positioning the brand to an empty room.
Oh.
No, you're absolutely right. Advertise to empty rooms where we work.
Yeah. Lost you there for a second, but I think we got the gist of that. Yeah, it's no point talking to an empty room.
Exactly. Yeah. And we try and stay away from that in our agency. Yeah.
But if you've got some knowledge in your business that your target audience or target audiences are going to be interested in, then probably you've got to, we talk a lot about blogs, about that's your blog content, that's your PR content, etc. I guess it's your potentially a podcast content as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Definitely. I think it's an exciting time in audio. I think there's, as we've spoken about this many a times, screen fatigue and all of that. I think there's a drive away from screens to a certain extent, and there's an increase in a move towards voice activation and audio and sound. So it's an exciting time for brands and audio space, because you can now, and this would be really interesting to some of your listeners, you can now produce actionable audio ads. So if you're listening to if you're listening to radio, or you're listening to music like Spotify on your smart speaker and it's got advertising, you can now produce adverts that listeners can respond to in real time. So for example, I'm listening to Heart FM, let's say, through my smart speaker. I hear an advert for a car that I like the sound of. I can say to Alexa, open up Ford Mustang, and then it will take me down a journey, a customer journey, a funnel, where it will ask me questions, I will respond, and then I will book a test drive.
Wow. And I guess more and more people are getting this technology in their homes. They're becoming more comfortable with it. And I guess also, you mentioned during lockdown, people working from home. I think moving forward, that's not really going to completely change. Some people are moving to hybrid models, but most office-based workers are going to be doing at least some element of working from home from now on. I don't think that's ever going to go completely rewind. So I guess over the longer term, this is going to be something to consider.
Yeah. I think, I don't know what will happen in terms of the going back to the office situation. But I think there's a mix, isn't there? There's some agencies that really want everyone back in the office because they want the culture and what have you. But I think, like you said, there's a talent shortage. So I think those really desirable candidates for jobs and agencies, they'll be able to dictate whether or not they want to, how much time they want to stay at home and how much they want to go into the office.
I guess it comes back to your target audience again, who it is you're talking to, and whether they are a more forward-thinking type of business that what needs to and where there is that skill shortage as well. I know my sectors in so engineering, for example, really struggling, and construction really struggling in skill shortage.
The same is true. The same is true in advertising and advertising agencies. There's a bit of a shortage on high-end skill.
Yeah. So I guess that's another thing to think of. If your audience, again, it comes back to having time, isn't it? As well as, I guess, the potential for working from home. There are lots of things in business to business anyway. Business to consumer is kind of different again. But yeah, there are all sorts of interesting things to consider. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I've got so many ideas now. I'm probably going to be next 6 months. I'm probably on the phone, Sean.
Well, you know, I could talk about the power of audio and how great it is for brands all day long. So yeah, whenever you fancy a chat, Samantha, I'm always here.
So is there anything else in terms of audio you don't think that we've covered that the marketing professionals or other businesses that do their own marketing ought to think about?
Maybe having an audio identity. So we're all familiar with visual brand guidelines, and I think increasingly brands are becoming more aware of the need to have audio brand guidelines, especially if their marketing involves multiple channels where there's audio and visual or just audio, so that there's consistency across all communications. It makes sense to codify what your brand sounds like, and that's not just in terms of your tone of voice as in the language you use, but literally, what does your brand sound like? Do you have music on your commercials? What kind of music would that be? Do you have a sonic ident? What back in the day we used to call a jingle? Do you have a brief set of notation that encapsulates what your brand stands for? We're familiar with Intel, we're familiar with Netflix, we're familiar with HBO, when you
McDonald's, I guess.
McDonald's, exactly. There's loads of them, and as soon as we hear that, we think of the brand. We don't even need to hear the brand's name. So
just like if you're seeing the logo.
It's like you're seeing the logo, yeah. So it's a very cost-effective way to trigger a brand memory.
Yeah.
Well, it takes time to establish that. But so
of course.
That's something that I would make sure brands are thinking about when they're producing their when they're producing their visual brand guidelines, to also be thinking about their audio brand guidelines, especially if, as I think there is, a move away from screens and a move towards audio. You want to be, all brands, B2B, B2C, they want to be where their audience is. They want to be where their target customers are. And if their target customer is in the audio space, you need to play in that audio space.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And it's another, it sort of brings in emotion again. As well, I think, when you start, if you get it right, which is really I think sometimes I've probably mentioned this in a few of my interviews. I think sometimes some B2B marketers think emotion is irrelevant in B2B, and that is completely incorrect. Research would definitely show otherwise. So yeah, that's also a really good point, having that sort of something that brings the brand to mind.
Yeah, in a very short snapshot. It's strange that people, for me, I find it so strange that people would ever think that any kind of advertising or marketing should be without emotion. Yeah. Because emotion is what triggers a response. Yeah. And drives action,
Yeah, I think some people think, especially in my sector, some people think that people are the people who are making the decisions are very, very rational beings, They make a decision purely on data, and that's just not the case. You've got to get, they're not even going to look at the data until you've got their attention for a start. And we even in B2B, quite often we make a decision and then justify our decision afterwards with logic.
Exactly. I think, there's research that's been shown that human psychology proves that, it's emotion first and then it's the rational thought afterwards.
It might be different emotions that people are thinking of in terms of B2B, but it's 100% just as important as in B2C.
Yeah, because I think it goes back to the point that businesses don't make decisions, it's people within businesses that make decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's all really interesting. I've got a lot to think about here, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching have got a lot to think about now. So that was brilliant. Thank you very much for that. It's really interesting.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And before you go, do you have anything to plug?
No, I don't. Plug. I'm not writing a book at the moment. I don't have any webinars running. I'll tell you what, if anyone listening or watching this has any questions, or if we've talked about anything that they want to talk a bit more about, tell them they're welcome to get in touch.
Brilliant.
That's what I'll plug. I'll plug a free chat. There you go.
Free chat, awesome. Awesome. Well, that I will be putting all of Sean's links and contact details wherever I put this out. So look out for that. It'll be I will host this on my website, and that will definitely, all that information will be there. And brilliant. Thank you so much, Sean.
No, thank you, Samantha. It's been fun.
And thank you to our viewers. Bye.
Bye. See you later.